perhaps we could speak about Kazan more now from the framework of a topic you have written extensively about and recently about, which is this question of BRICS constructing an alternative payment system and financial infrastructure, and the centrality of things like blockchain currency, like
Mhm.
the new development bank based in Shanghai. So we
Mhm.
have Russia and China, of course, spearheading a lot of this. Could you talk about some of the details that you have uncovered recently about what will be discussed and how an alternative payment system, an alternative financial system will be in the works during this summit and, of course, future BRICS deliberations and efforts?
Yeah, I strongly suggest to all of you, please try to read this column. I try to make it as concisely as palatable as possible, using Russian analysts. And the second part of the column, it's Professor Michael Hudson speaking. I sent an email to Michael, said, Michael, this is what the Russians are saying. This is what's on the table. Please tell me what you think should happen. And his suggestions are fantastic. But it's going to be very complicated because they don't exactly align with what they are discussing here. But most important things will be on the table, and we still don't know how they're going to present it to the other BRICS, and we still don't know the conclusions and how they're going to present this to the rest of the world. A system called BRICS Bridge, which is inspired on the M-Bridge system, which is ongoing. He has among them the People's Bank of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, Emirates, Saudi Arabia. There to the a few months ago, 2 months ago or so. For instance, it's an example that I always mention because it's quite graphic. The Thais buy oil from the Emirates, and they pay through M-Bridge. This means they don't need currency. They are not afflicted by currency volatility. It's always the same unit via the BRICS bridge. And this they could expand this to not only the BRICS, but the BRICS candidates as well. Everybody would be trading via the BRICS bridge based on the M bridge, which forget about currency volatility. Number one, excellent. How they are developing this, the guys from the BRICS Business Council say it's not even redacted yet, the final document. That's one thing. Another thing is a system called BRICS Pay. BRICS Pay is going to be, I'm sure many of you know Alipay. Well, BRICS Pay is the same thing, and it will evade SWIFT because it will be intra-BRICS and linked to future BRICS members as well. Another thing is the unit. The unit, well, the first time, the first column on the unit, we did it a few months ago. I was following this process for almost 1 year. I had a lot of meetings with these guys. They briefed me in detail. And then, okay, let's try to present this to the world. It was picked up in the US everywhere. The Wall Street Journal picked it up. They're trying to contact the guys from the unit. What is this all about? So the Americans immediately noticed that this thing is powerful. It's a system based on 40% gold, 60% currencies of the BRICS countries, an alternative payment system. They still don't, in fact, talking to the Russian Ministry of Finance, which has to talk to the other ministers of finance of BRICS, they still, it's not finalized yet. But all these things are on the table. And they may converge to the table in BRICS, and they in all these solutions and new mechanisms can be introduced at the same time. There's more. For instance, a new insurance setup apart from the Western insurance system. Very, very important. a new BRICS rating agency that does not depend on the Westerners rating everybody and rating the global South all the time. Very, very important. So when you put this all together, the dossier is mind-boggling, in fact. So there will be some very important meetings next week and the week after next involving the Russian Central Bank, Minister of Finance. They're going to have to talk to the other ones with the Chinese as well. So we assume that within 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to have more or less the final decisions and the final documents, which will then go, the Sherpas will have to present to the leaders. And then to be approved in 4 weeks from now. So the deadlines are, wow, we are at the last stretch. So it's people are working 48 hours a day on all these dossiers, But you can see that there are alternatives. Absolutely. And what Professor Michael Hudson suggested is slightly different. When you read the column, you're going to see. And it's already circulating here. Right. So one of the guys told me, look, everybody now is reading what Michael Jackson. Can you imagine Michael Jackson? It's just a thriller.
He's back. Okay. Yes.
He's back. What Michael Hudson suggested, and they may incorporate some of these ideas. And it's something that we discussed here. Why don't you bring Michael Jackson? Why don't you bring Michael Hudson as an advisor to all of you guys? Which is something that may happen in the near future as well.
That's very interesting. Given all that you said, it's a huge outline.
Yes.
There's a lot of components to this, but it is now there are far more details than we have had in the past, and I did share the column in the chat. Due to censorship, I'm not bringing up the Sputnik title, but I will say that you can find it on Sputnik, find it on
it's
Pepe.
already being published in the US, Danny. Today I saw it's on UM's review. It's probably the top story, and it's on Zero Hedge as well. So it's already circulating in the US, which is it's a very good thing.
Great. So everyone, make sure you follow Pepe's Telegram. So you can read the column. But I wanted to ask you lastly, Pepe, on this question, what are the most significant challenges? You have, of course, Russia and China being the mega kind of powers with the financial and political capacity to really spearhead this. What are the biggest challenges that you're hearing in terms of getting this off the ground? Because there still are a lot of doubters on the ability for the multipolar world to truly create an alternative to the US dollar. We know that it's still far away, but it seems like the pace of de-dollarization has accelerated very dramatically, even in just the last few years. What are the biggest challenges from here, given this new architecture that you outlined?
Well, the internal BRICS problems, they have to solve. When Lavrov told us earlier this year that we need to accommodate the new members, first of all, that's why that was diplomatic language to say frictions among the new BRICS members or between the new and the old, etc. We have to solve this before even start thinking about expansion. And now expansion is not only the 34 nations that Putin outlined a few weeks ago. Now it's getting to 40. And after the BRICS summit, it's going to get to 50, 60. So everybody will want to join BRICS. There's no question about that. So can you imagine managing this expansion and at the same time managing the different dossiers, especially geoeconomic, that have to satisfy all old and new members at the same time? Wow. It's something that has not been attempted since the end of the Second World War, 1945. But then at the time, the Americans didn't have to satisfy anybody. They satisfied themselves and they built a system for themselves, right? Now it's different. Now you have a group of nations trying to build a system that will satisfy most of the planet. It's a much more complicated thing. So for instance, this title, which is very provocative, I borrowed from Michael, in fact, the idea that we need a BRICS Bretton Woods. It's not going to be now. It's not going to be in Kazan. It's going to be maybe a few years from now. It will happen. But what was being discussed, maybe 2 years ago, we need BRICS Bretton Woods 3. No, this is going to be this will be the post-Bretton Woods, in fact. And of course, it freaks out the ruling class in the US and the Atlanticists, of course, because then you're going to have two systems. Basically, the world will be divided in two. The global South, global majority, will follow post-Bretton Woods, and the US and the vassals will be still subjected to the rules of Bretton Woods. But this is not, it's not now. It's not going to be next month. It's going to be before the end of this decade, probably.
Yeah, and I want, I know I said lastly, but maybe lastly, you mentioned and I wanted to pull up the article so people can find it on Un's review. And I'll put it in the chat after this. But I wanted to ask you, Pepe, about India in particular, because I have my frustrations with India's back and forth, and it's where it falls geopolitically in many respects, as well as I respect its position, of course, on Russia. But when it comes to de-dollarization, when it comes to this new financial system, how do you see India? Because the West has all these dreams for India. They believe India will be a great buffer against China. They believe India is now, which I think is a wild dream, is the new competitor against China. But yet BRICS is really led by Russia and China, and India has all this potential to be a huge player, if it isn't already one, in all of these talks. Where do you see India's role really beyond the smokescreen that we hear from the West?
Exactly. Well, I had some very good conversations with Indian scholars at the Vladivostok Forum early this month. Excellent. They were telling me about some of the problems, of course, internal problems, Modi government, how the Indian ruling class is starting to understand finally that the Quad is a trap for them. You saw the Quad Squad meeting, no? with the who's next, with the zombie saying who's next, and Modi was sitting right beside him, and then the mic was on, and everybody said it was off, and he gave away the game, saying that this is basically a containment of China mechanism. So the Indians are starting to wise up to what's really going on. And at the same time, because they have a very good relationship with both Russia and Iran, they know that, for instance, when the international north-south transportation corridor will be in full flight for Indian businesses, this is going to be fantastic. It will open commercial possibilities for them all across Eurasia, in fact. And how the port of Chabahar in southern Iran, Indian investment, and they built the road from Chabahar to the Afghan border. When this thing is up and running full flight, the same thing. It's the Indian connection to Afghanistan and Central Asia as a whole. Another immense commercial opportunity for India. So they are focalizing on these connectivity corridors, which for them is absolutely essential towards greater Eurasia. And they see that this has nothing to do with what the Americans are proposing, which basically is essentially nothing. You're going to be an annex of our containment of China strategy. This is what the Americans are offering to the Indians, So they're starting to get the picture, but it's a long process. And they told me about very complex internal problems, Indian politics, internal problems as well. I'm very curious because this, talking about India, I did a podcast to Sputnik India earlier this week. I'm very curious to see the reaction. It's getting good numbers on the Twitter X, but I have to read the reactions of Indians themselves. And of course, I want to go there. I haven't been there in a while. And there's no other way, Danny, right? Just like you went to Xinjiang to see the real Xinjiang. Same thing. India have to travel across India, which is sometimes can be a very complicated experience, but then you learn a lot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that would be wonderful over the next decade or so is if India can truly integrate into BRICS in that spirit of BRICS in terms of infrastructure, so that travel can be easier, because it is quite difficult. It's not like going to Russia and China, which have far more advanced rail networks,
and they don't have the infrastructure inside India. It's like only a few regions. Exactly.
Yeah, only a few regions. It's hard to see things. It's hard to get around. But I think those are all good points, Pepe, about India, is that there is so much pressure to turn India into this anti-China node, we could call it. But at the same time, the overall trend of geopolitics is that doing that is political and geopolitical and economic suicide, just like India recognized with Russia. So it'll be interesting to see if BRICS will be able to, unite further with that understanding in mind. There's always talk about Vladimir Putin being very pro-Trump. And then there was a lot of backlash about the comments he made about Kamala Harris being more predictable, just like Biden. So, of course, why wouldn't Russia support Kamala Harris for the next president? But Trump recently made comments about sanctions, where he said that the United States would end sanctions on Russia and Iran should he become president. And on the other hand, you mentioned this pressure that the global South feels. Even Iran felt pressured recently to talk and state openly that it was against what Russia is doing militarily in Ukraine. Given that there are these pressures, and given that there's all this rhetoric flying around, what do you believe is the truth about where Putin stands on how the global situation is moving forward as it attempts to resolve what's going on in Ukraine? And it's very clear, Putin has been very clear, the resolution, and the Russian government is very clear that the resolution is meeting the objectives of the SMO. But how will it navigate these kind of global challenges? Because you do have elections. The election season in the U.S. is always a circus. And you also have a lot of pressures on even global South and BRICS members to even rhetorically perhaps hedge in all kinds of different directions.
Well, it will depend to a certain extent on what the BRICS will present to the global majority after the end of the summit. Because this will, don't forget that it's the Russian presidency, and BRICS are following a Russia-designed agenda with Russian priorities. Of course, listening to everybody else, but Russia needs to have a very cohesive, coherent, and strong message at the end of the BRICS summit, especially because a few weeks later, we're going to have the G20 in Rio. So the BRICS can already preempt completely all the blah, blah, blah that is going to take place in Rio, and won't lead anywhere, because the G20 nowadays basically split between the collective West and the global South. And top BRICS are members of the G20. So it's going to this G20 is going to be split, and it won't get anywhere, essentially. But BRICS is a completely different story. and a strong BRICS showing they will arrive in Rio dictating the agenda and not reacting to what the Garden will try to impose on them once again. Now it's different because the BRICS are going to set the agenda at the summit, and then they'll arrive in a position of force at the G20. And obviously everybody knows that, especially the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians as well. And the Iranians, the fact that they are talking to the Europeans are talking to the Iranians. The Europeans don't want to abandon Iran, and the Europeans want to invest in Iran like they did before the sanctions, before the JCPOA, before the sanctions, etc. But the Russian position is realistic in terms of elections. Whatever happens, Putin's remarks about Kamala, there was fantastic trolling, especially because the American system doesn't understand irony or sarcasm or metaphors or figures of speech or trolling for that matter. They take everything literally. You know, it's very limited intellectually, you know, so they took it literally. So, and obviously the Russians who are masters of metaphors, they loved it. Here it became a joke everywhere. Putin trolling the Democrats and the Democrats buying it, you know. As for what Trump is going to do, it's once again, blah, blah, blah. Nobody really knows. He says one thing, he does another. And don't forget, he's a top Zionist. So he won't do anything that would compromise Israel. Russians also know it because they have to deal with their Zionist lobby here, which is immensely powerful in Russia as well, and includes a lot of very powerful oligarchs as well. So to deal with that here is also, for Putin, is extremely tricky. And even with all these limitations, the Russians at the UN and diplomatically via Lavrov, Ryabkov, etc., they are being more and more forcefully pro-Palestine, just like the Chinese. And then we have everybody, and we have Erdogan was, in fact, one of his best performances was in New York. Everything that he said about the genocide, that was straight to the point. That was not Erdogan hedging anything. This is you could feel it. This is what he feels about it, at least, which is very rare because he always has this pasha veil, you know, and you never know what he's up to. But on Palestine, that was the real deal. So these are the auspicious aspects because the top BRICS converge on the key issue: genocide in Palestine, support for Palestinian sovereignty. So they are aligned with the lens of Islam as a whole. So immediately they have 2 billion followers. Just like that, you know, so this is enormous, enormous, enormous. How they're going to transfer this goodwill into practical decisions, well, that's it starts now, right?
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.